Hi, my name is Nancy Love, and I'm waiting for an indication that this is actually on, and it may already be, but I'm not sure. So I have something to say to you today, and here goes. I made a video about 19 minutes long a few days ago. It's called Ally and Rise. Good cops, ally and rise. Actually, to ally and rise. I was so grateful that anything I've ever done in any of these YouTube videos has been helpful. If I pause, it's because I'm getting indicators at times that the connection is discontinuous. If I speak slowly, it's because I've noticed that when I do these live videos from this inadequate Wi Fi where I live, um, short as I can, but I on this matter. And believe me, I am just getting started here. It has been said back about 15 or 20 years ago that there were approximately 26 million slaves in the world at that time. Now I see indicators that there are estimations of maybe 40 million slaves in the world, people being held slaves in the world. Let's add virtually all animal species to the slavery that humanity has enacted upon their lives, and there are billions of slaves. Animals held in factory farms and experimental laboratories and so called shelters where they are killed if not adopted or fostered out. All of that is slavery. Um, Fur farms and all that, slavery. And humans have no right to harm innocents. We have no right to take their lives. Let's get back to the human slavery issue because what I have to say may be controversial, but some of you will understand what I'm saying only too well. I think there are closer to about 8 billion slaves on this planet. And there's an insidious evil trying to take over all of our lives. Yes, it is absolutely promulgated and basically housed in the context of uh, worshiping evil instead of good. Worshiping evil. Duh. How smart is that, really? And it takes a number of manifestations: chronic war, um, gang activity, mob activity. To me, gangs are for young mobsters, and the mafia is what you get into when you grow up. If you're that corrupt and that foolish and stupid and greedy and lazy and foul. But I do know people who've been recruited into contexts that had them doing things they never would have done otherwise. And they perceive themselves as victims and slaves, not as willing participants. And I think that needs to be carefully considered because ultimately, I do believe that most of us would be cooperative. We would live one another and our community well. We would be members of healthy tribes if there were not this pervasive force in the planet, in the world, in societies, trying to make us all as corrupt as it is. And it is basically evil. And those of us who are good need to get organized, get together, ally, and rise. Evil, these people have a way of socially isolating the good. They try to discredit us, they try to defame us, they try to cause us legal problems that we do not deserve. They file completely false reports and try to make us seem guilty of precisely the things they know we're not guilty of, but they themselves are. They will plant things like drugs and weapons and so forth in contexts where it will make innocent people seem guilty. Their victims will be considered for crimes. I know of people who will look you right in the face and admit they've tried to poison you or um, drug you and make you lose the capacity to defend yourself. I know some of the most horrifying people, and they're not even really what I would call human anymore. They are slaves to crime. You got your gangs recruiting youngsters in schools all over the world. You've got your adults getting recruited into various mafias throughout the planet. And here goes Controversy City, Arizona. You got militaries. And I have been told from childhood on, including very recently, that joining a military group can feel just exactly like becoming a slave. And those who do it willingly feel really foolish because they thought they were serving their country and they could wear those uniforms with pride. And boot camp is something that breaks the spirit. It is a context not in which young recruits are lifted up and respected and made dignified, but in fact, um, boot camps in militaries, probably internationally, are specifically designed to psychologically and even physically torture people into submission. What bothered me about the military when my parents were trying to get me to join so I could get ROTC and so forth, NASA actually tried to make me a space shuttle astronaut, but they wanted me to join ROTC, go to medical school at their at their cost, and then join the Air Force, train as a pilot, and only then, 8 years later, join NASA to train for the space shuttle program. And I kept saying, my problem is the first stumbling block, ROTC, which is a college group for people who are wanting to go into the military. Oh, it looks like I have one watcher. Wonder who that might be. It's a question of, you'd think a military would really want people to be as intelligent as they could be, as creative as they could be. When they have good ideas, get those ideas considered. But in point of fact, there's a lot of egotistical uh, power plays and dominant submission interactions in militaries worldwide. And creativity and intellect is not necessarily something you want to display if you want to rise in those contexts. But when you get out of contexts that have enslaved your soul, you know that creativity and intellect are what you absolutely do need to still have intact if you want to ally and rise. By calling people forth who reject slavery on every level, I am asking the good people to organize, to form alliances, to create a context in which they feel safer, for having dignity, moral integrity, decency. Those of us with clean hands, we need to rise. Those of you who've dirtied your hands and dirtied your lives and sullied your integrity and just sold your morality for a cheap cost of affiliation with these slime, you too might have some moral character left, but you might have to dig deeper to find it. I encourage you to dig deep into that well of what you remember about yourself while you were still innocent, there was a time when you were an innocent child. So please, please try to remember who you were then and go back to that point where something caused you to split off into who you are now. Because regardless of what you've done in the past, today is a new day, and today is the day you could change your life by making a decision to find your own innocence. And you could be on this incredibly blissful trajectory in which you attempt to redeem yourself. You do not have to be a slave to crime. You utterly and absolutely do not have to endure slavery. And whether that slavery came about because of your familial context, gang recruitment when you were a youngster, mafia recruitment when you were an adult, military service, where you serve chronic war, whatever you have done in your life, whatever you have become, today could be your day to ally and rise with those of us who have refused slavery on all its levels. I've talked to people who are in police forces, and they say that that's why I named the original video about this Good Cops, Ally and Rise. And I think it's very tragic, and I think it is very scary when people who go into a field like that because they're decent, moral, and good and want to help people not be crime victims and try to protect the rest of us find out that some of their colleagues are corrupt. Some of their own colleagues are actually the criminals they want to protect the rest of us from. And it means so much to me. It is so fulfilling when I see a good cop ally and rise. But the thing I'm trying to stress is that we have to get together. I can't do this alone. No one good cop I know can change a whole police force, although some of them, from what I understand, are trying. It takes it takes moral dignity from the chief down. But I know several people who have been or currently are chiefs of police forces in cities in the United States, not necessarily ones I've lived in or live in now, but they say that I said, well, you know, this person is corrupt and that person is corrupt. Why don't you fire them? Why do you have employees like that? And one guy said that he had done that with some of his criminal cops on his staff. But he said, Nancy, in some ways, I have more power over these people and I'm more capable of helping control their behavior if I control their salary, if I control their retirement benefits and their medical benefits. He said um, he had a better opportunity to help sculpt their behavior and make them better men and women. Is, you know, a unique perspective there. I learned a lot from that conversation. What I'm trying to say is that there's probably not any more horrible tragedy than to see someone who spent their life, their childhood, their part of their adulthood being wise and kind and nurturing and honest, somebody who won't steal or raise their hand against others in any way. It's really horrifying to see somebody go downhill when they get recruited into one of these contexts. And it's what I think of. I hearken back to someone, a wise person in the 60s, told me that corruption of the best is the worst. He said, I want you to remember that all your life, kid, because I think you're one of the best that humanity has to offer. And you must never, ever, ever allow any threats, no matter how harsh, no matter, you must never allow temptations, no matter how grand. You must never let threats or temptations allow you to be corrupted in your behavior, your spirituality, your philosophies. You must always retain your goodness because you can be such a tremendous role model for the rest of us if you remain decent, moral, and wise. And I've always remembered that, and I've always followed that advice. I have refused corruption. I have refused the temptations of mafia recruitment, basically. And I have suffered horrifying threats. I have suffered the reality when threats are made real. I've had my face smashed in by an evil, corrupt person in LA. I have had my spine, pelvis, and legs damaged by a group of horrifying men and women who were just angry at me because I was trying to prevent them from trafficking children, and they weren't only using kids as sex slaves internationally, kidnapping children and purchasing them at gunpoint. These people were, in some cases, actually killing little kids and selling their body parts on something called the black market for human organs. And believe me, don't shoot the messenger. I personally made it to the age of 50 before I knew there was such a thing. I wish I had better news. I wish I was part of a species that couldn't even conceive of doing that to its own young. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as there's even one human being on this planet, corrupt, foolish, lazy, greedy, stupid enough to think that's the way to earn a living, then we all should be morose, and we all should find and ferret out those people. You don't worship evil, you stomp it out. You don't worship evil. You don't embrace corruption. You get rid of it in your own lives, in social contexts, in your communities, in your police forces, in your militaries. You don't embrace evil? How smart is that, really? Duh. You embrace love. You embrace goodness. You embrace the profound wealth that spiritual wisdom and kindness and absolutely unfailingly trustworthy will have you embrace. You, God, you're never, ever, ever going to have anything like self respect as long as you follow the lead of corrupt, foolish, evil leaders. And these people, from what I understand, actually worship evil. Duh. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard of my entire life. I came up with a corollary to corrupt, corruption of the best is the worst. And I came up with it just a few years ago because I had talked to some of the most corrupt, awful people I had ever known, literally just, the most abject criminals capable of horrible things. And some of them said, just knowing me or knowing someone like me, just suffering a glancing blow with goodness had helped change their lives. I've had people cry on me who say that knowing one person who is willing to see anything good left, they themselves had lost their own ability to believe in the potential for good behavior on the part of themselves, had fulfilled them and changed their destiny. I've had people look at me and say, The fact that you will still talk to me when I've been as horrible to you and to others, including, small helpless animals, when they've done the most horrible things, the fact that I will look them in the eye and try to help them figure out how to get right with God and the rest of the world has been one of the best things that ever happened to them, and it set them on an entirely new path. That one glancing blow with goodness, redemption of, can also mean that um, people. I'm going to pause for a moment until this gets back. I apologize. I'm making this live and I'm using Wi-Fi that is not continuous. Okay. Redemption of the worst is the best. That's a responsibility that each person has to accept. I can't redeem you. You have to do it yourself. You got to wash your hands. And you absolutely have to go into whatever kind of context you need. You need to get different friends, stop affiliating with the people who support your evil. You've got to, if you need to get drug or alcohol counseling, if you're subject to that. One of the primary ways I've seen people become corrupted is because these contexts, like gangs and mafia, will try to get people drug and alcohol addicted. And once your brain chemistry is attached to that alteration, you could be the smartest person, you could be the most, health oriented person, but your brain chemistry itself has become addicted. Your soul isn't, your personality doesn't want to be, but you do become physically addicted to those types of things. So if that is part of your whole phenomenon and your context and why you're colluding with and affiliating with people who are evil, it's because they've got you on their drugs, then get off their drugs and down chemistry again, because you're handing them your morality and your dignity when they hand you those drugs. It goes on and on. And like I said, I'm just getting started here. I have to be one of the bravest people in the world to just get on YouTube and say these things. But it's about some time somebody did. There have been times in the history of history in which one person had an idea, one person was brave enough to talk about it, other people embraced that idea, and maybe it took a while, but then they were 100 strong, and then they were 1,000 strong, and then they were 1,000,000 strong, and then they were 1,000,000,000 strong. People, we need to be 8. We need to heal the slavery